Hey everybody, this is going to be my second attempt at making a 1911 complete disassembly video. First time I tried it, it went too long. So this is a 1911 disassembly for just your annual maintenance and cleaning. That's the reason I'm taking this one apart. I'm going to actually start while I'm talking to you. Because there's a lot of cleaners and oils and stuff like that on the pistol, I'm going to actually take them off. If you had a vintage 1911, I would also suggest that as well. Keep them, protect them from damage. These ones are just rubber. The pistol I'm using today is going to be a Kimber stainless 2. It's a friend of mine's, and he just wanted it complete stripped down and cleaning. Right now I'm just taking an Allen wrench and I'm removing the screws to the grip. Original screws are common head screwdrivers, so the flat type screws. You can just use a regular screwdriver for those. Just make sure that it's the right size. You don't want to use one that's too small and slip and mess up the head of your screw. In addition to that, you also don't want to mess up your wood grips or whatever grips you had on there if they were laser grips or something like that. The trick with these grips is once you have the pistol apart, you can push in or you can go through the mag well and push in and pop them out just like that. Next thing I'm going to do is just field strip the pistol itself. In order to do that, I'm going to re-verify it's clear. Nothing in the chamber, nothing in the mag well. So we're good. To take apart a 1911, I'm basically going to push down on this plunger for the recoil spring. And then I'm going to turn this barrel bushing a quarter of a turn to the left. At that point, I can take my plunger out. I can also take my recoil spring out. All that stuff will come out at once. It is under pressure, so once you turn this back around, you've got to watch to make sure that doesn't come flying out. So I'm going to do that. It's going to be off camera real quick here. So if you guys can see how this came off of here, I turned my bushing. Turn it the other way so you got some better light. I turned my bushing quarter turn to the right if you were staring down the sights. At that point, I could take my bushing and my recoil spring off. This bushing is actually, you can see right through it, especially to this pistol because it has a full-length guide rail for the spring. And I'll show you that whenever I get into the pistol. So I'm going to just take that bushing, turn it to the left. There's a little keyed portion. Give it a little wiggle as I pull out because Kimber is kind of a custom. On your GI models and your lower ends, it'll be a little bit easier to come off. This one's just... Kimber likes to have that accuracy, so they make those barrel bushings a little bit tighter. Now I'm going to pull this slide back, and there's two notches here. If there was an empty magazine in the pistol, the spring pressure would push up on our slide lock, just like that there. If you look back here, there's actually a second notch, and that's our disassembly notch. So we're going to push that. I'm going to push in from the left-hand side, or the right-hand side. Push in, and it's just going to come right out. Just like that. After I've done that, I can take my slide and push it all the way forward. At this point, I got my two main assemblies. I've got my grip frame, and I've got my slide assembly. I like doing the slide because there's less parts digging into it, so I'm just going to knock that out right now. Here's my full-length guide rod. Barrel comes out through the front, just like 1911s. And then I have my slide assembly. With the slide assembly, the firing pin comes through this block in the back, and then you have your extractor right here. In order to get all this out of here, I'm going to actually push in on my firing pin disconnector. And I'm going to push in on my firing pin once I do that. So I'm pushing in on my disconnector, pushing in on my firing pin. Notice my firing pin actually goes through that block. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly pull down on that block. So my firing pin is actually held in and recessed. There is a spring. You can see it just came undone. There is a spring around our firing pin. So it's one thing to be aware of when doing this. Is that firing pin can come flying out along with the spring. Our firing pin block is going to actually stop that from happening, but I'm still going to control it like it was still going to. So here I'm taking this my pin out the bottom, just sliding it down. That came out. Notice my firing pin is still retained in there, but I'm going to keep pressure on it and press down on my firing pin block. And my firing pin and spring will come right out. There's your firing pin, your firing pin spring. These do come apart, just like that. Put those back on. Next thing I have is my extractor ejector. So what I'm just going to do is I'm pushing in from the breech face on my extractor. Notice my extractor is coming out. Okay, notice it's coming out, and I can pull it the rest of the way out after using a punch to get it out. Sometimes you have to kind of jiggle it past your your firing pin block. So there's your extractor. Besides that, the only thing to take off sights themselves and firing pin block, I leave those in there. It's really not necessary unless there's some major problems where the spring is broken in there or it's gummed up real bad. I just leave it go. You might be asking what I'm putting everything on. I've just got a paper plate with a rag on top of it. The paper plate, some things like to roll around so the edges hold it, and the rag just kind of retains everything as well. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart my frame assembly. One thing to note with this is whenever you have a frame apart on a 1911, if you pull this trigger, you depress your grip safety, pull your trigger, your hammer is going to fall. And when your hammer falls, it's going to actually fall on your frame itself. It's one thing to look for when you're buying a used 1911 to see if somebody's been dry firing it without the slide on there, and you'll get stress cracks. So just be careful whenever you guys are buying used firearms. I'm going to take out my safety first. If you look on the right hand side, there's no double safety or ambidextrous safety on this. So you can see the standard pins. They're rounded on this side. This is the pin for the safety. To do this, I'm going to leave the hammer in the cock position, and I'm going to engage my safety halfway, and I'm going to pull up on it. So I'm pulling it up towards the camera, and I'm wiggling it back and forth. When you do that, see how it's separated from the frame? Another thing you're going to have is you're going to have your detent in here. One thing to watch is if it was put together improperly, or if it was a Smith & Wesson, I believe, they do not kink their spring in here, so you can lose these plungers in the spring. I'm going to pull this the rest of the way out, my safety. Notice my safety came straight out. One nice thing with 1911s is that they don't have anything peened in them. Peening is basically if I was to take a long elongated punch, and whenever there's a pin in there, I would be dimpling the frame and the pin and making those kind of one unit. So they weren't meant to be taken apart. 1911s aren't built like that. Next thing I'm going to do, I like pulling this out. This is my detent for my safety and my slide lock. Notice how the spring is kinked. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's the way it's designed. It retains it inside of that tube. After that, I'm going to lower my hammer. Rule of thumb is whenever you guys are lowering these to control them, to put your hand or your thumb or some sort of skin in between the hammer and the frame. That way you don't accidentally slip and drop it. From there, push out my hammer pin. So I'm going to go from the right hand side. I'm going to push it down on it with a punch. And there is some spring pressure on this. So when you're doing this, you want to control your punches or your pins. I've taken my pin completely out. Notice my pin. One thing to note with the pins is it's tapered on one side and rounded on the other. That is so we can only go from left to right. Using my hand over top of my hammer and not facing it towards my face, I'm going to slowly pull out my punch, which is going to release my hammer and my hammer strut. One thing to be aware of with your hammer and your hammer strut is sometimes they do not peen this pin, so it can fall out and it's a really small pin to find. This one in the Kimber is actually peened, so I don't have to worry about that. Next thing we're gonna do is actually take off our mainspring housing. That's this portion right here that's checkered. Notice it's got a pin that's indented on the left-hand side and not on the right-hand side. So we're actually going to push in from the left-hand side on this. The reason we took our pin out before, or our hammer out before, was because our mainspring inside of here was pushing down on a little bar, which was pushing down on top of this pin, which was retaining our mainspring housing. Now we're going to remove our pin, our mainspring housing is going to slide down. Sometimes these take a little coaxing, but this one's nice because it just comes right out. One thing about this Kimber is it's a stainless steel model. It's got extended guide rail, and there's really no saving on weight, but somehow Kimber saved on weight, and they made this mainspring housing out of plastic. It is not metal. Probably not the best material for it, since you have a spring in there and you have metal pins going through it. I don't know the logic behind that. So here's our grip safety. That's all one piece. Inside the pistol, we're going to have kind of three things in one. This is going to be our trigger return spring, this is our sear spring, and then this is our grip safety. The next thing we're going to do is actually take out our sear assembly, as well as our disconnector for our firing pin. All I'm doing is pushing in right to left on that same pin, or that lower pin. That comes right out. It is tapered as well. And then we're going to have some parts fall out. So what we had fall out, and what I'm trying to fish out here, this is our sear assembly. This is our firing pin disconnector. And this is for Series 80 pistols. The name escapes me on it as well right now. If I didn't say it before, I'm not an expert on 1911s by any means. So the last thing I'm going to do to take apart my spring is I'm going to actually depress my safety. If you look on the right hand side of your safety, if it's not ambidextrous, you have a screw. Standard screw on government models was just a common screwdriver. This one's an Allen wrench. I'm going to depress my safety like a quarter of the way, and I'm actually going to turn this an eighth of a turn. Turn it to the right. So yeah, I'm going to the right with this. And it's going to turn and it's going to stop, and my safety is just going to push the rest of the way through. So there it is there. There's a little keyway here on the safety that I'm actually turned. Last thing, I'm going to push my trigger the rest of the way out. As you can see, my trigger came right on out. So that's about it, guys. That's the disassembly of the 1911. That's as far as I like to take it down for just an annual cleaning. If I've got a little bit more time here, I'm going to show you guys how to take apart 1911 mag real quick. So the only thing you're going to really need is your mag and your punch. If you look at some of these mags, they don't come apart at the bottom. They're welded together and ground down, so there's no way to take it off. So the only way is to come up through the top. What you're going to have to do, and I like using an old toothbrush for this, so save your toothbrushes for cleaning. I'm going to push down on my mag. I push down about halfway. If you look at it, you can see your spring coming down through there. So what you want to do is you want to take your punch, stick it right through your mag, just like that. So what happens is when you take your toothbrush out, your spring is compressed. The next thing you have to do is get your follower. Now usually a tap on the workbench will get it. Make sure it's padded so you don't dent your feed lips. But your follower is actually going to just be in there just like that. A lot of times you can, like I said, tap it on your hand or something and take it out. The next thing you're going to have to do is slowly pull out and control that spring, because that spring is going to want to come flying out of there. Take my pin out, and there's my spring. Just like that. And you disassemble the mag. So that's pretty much everything for disassembly in 1911s. You guys got any further questions or anything like that, just let me know. Put a comment in there, or let me know if you guys see something that wasn't right or you don't understand, and I'll try to answer it. Thanks for watching. Look for the reassembly of it. It's coming up soon.